Bunny, how are you, my dear friend, my brother from another mother? It is yours truly, Mr. Brandon Novak, that guy from those movies Jackass, TV shows Viva La Bam with the late, great Mr. Ryan Dunn, skateboarder, interventionist, motivational speaker, treatment center owner, cat owner. Say hi. Ruby says hi. Bunny. Yeah, a man who wears a lot of different hats, possesses a lot of different titles, but the one that's the most important, the nearest and dearest to my heart, is I'm a man in recovery. What that means is I haven't found the need to have a drink or a drug in almost 9 years to change the way I feel about my current state of being in this crazy thing called life. And I didn't get any of those titles without enduring some really tough fucking times in my life. And what that looked like for me was 22 years of active addiction, right? 13 inpatient treatment centers, lost count of outpatients and detoxes. My mother bought me a plot. People had taken life insurance policies out on me. At 38 years old, I was a homeless heroin addict who prostituted my body during the day and slept in an abandoned house during the night in West Baltimore. At the end of my addiction, my mother went to church and she prayed to God for him to either cure me or kill me because she could no longer take it anymore. And the reason why I share all that with you is because I understand that you're currently working on a fucking huge project, right? It is online thing that's going to just like take the world by storm, which I know it will because you have the power and the capability, the drive and the momentum to make that happen, buddy. And what that comes from is fucking failure, not succeeding. Just making things happen despite any and all adverse consequences. Because after all, tough times don't last, but tough people do. Right? Feelings aren't facts and they pass. So stay in there, grind, make this happen. Fuck motivation when you have discipline, right? Think less, do more. I love you, dog. Thank you so much for loving me and supporting my journey along this way.
If you were to look upon Brandon Thomas Novak for the first time, not knowing who he is or his past, you could be forgiven for making certain assumptions. With his slick back hair, slim build, and heavily tattooed frame, he looks like a straight-edge rock star in his 40s, who wouldn't seem out of place standing next to Blink-182 or Crazy Town. In reality, Brandon is a former skateboarding prodigy who traveled all over the US rubbing shoulders with skateboard royalty like Bam Margera and Tony Hawk, just to name a couple. He followed that up with a prominent acting and stunt career starring in some hit MTV shows and big budget films. Nowadays his life has taken a slightly different trajectory, as he now works as a certified intervention professional, motivational speaker, and recovery advocate who runs numerous sober living homes in Delaware. But for those who are more familiar with Brandon Novak, this is quite the turnaround. Mainly because for more than 2 decades, Brandon struggled badly with substance abuse, causing him to lose lucrative opportunities as well as close relationships. He also did things a level-headed person would never even consider doing, all for the sake of another hit. It got to a stage where things got so bad, people believed he would die soon. However, after one last rehab visit and a 90-day treatment program, Brandon was able to pull himself free from the grip of addiction. Today his life stands as a testament that even when you hit absolute rock bottom and have nothing left to lose, so long as you put in the necessary work and dedication, there is always a way out from the pain associated with substance abuse. As you probably guessed by now, this won't be the typical skateboarding story I've told in the past. This is Brandon Novak, from skater to jackass to recovery advocate. The date was December 10th, 1978. The highly anticipated film Superman debuted at the Kennedy Center in New York City to overwhelmingly positive fan response, establishing Christopher Reeves as the original Man of Steel for the big screen. Something else happened on that day exactly 1 year prior in the city of Baltimore, Maryland. At 6 pounds and 11 ounces, Brandon Thomas Novak was born to parents Jerome and Pat. It's fair to say his father and mother were almost completely opposite influences in the young Brandon's life. In 1964, while Pat was just a teenager, she got a low-level job at Mercy Hospital. She eventually worked her way up through the ranks to become a nuclear physicist before retiring as a board member after 53 years.
My mother, she's the most important person in this world to me. If I can be a centimeter of what she is, I have arrived, right? This woman is the best thing that ever happened to the world, or me in that matter. At 15 years old, she got her first job at Mercy Hospital, drawing blood for $5 a pop. She recently retired as a nuclear physicist on the board of Mercy Hospital. 53 years of gainful employment, second longest employer in Mercy Hospital history.
Obviously a very hard-working and dedicated woman, especially considering she was a mother of 2 other children besides Brandon. His father, on the other hand, according to Brandon, never worked a day in his life.
My father never held a job a day in his life. He taught me one thing: if and when I go to prison, how to conduct myself.
Jerome had a long criminal history and associated with outlaw motorcycle clubs. He also suffered from the same demon of addiction that would later plague Brandon's life.
Your dad's a crack addict?
Yeah, big time. He inherited his parents' house, $900,000 home, smoking crack, got all paranoid, started calling the police on himself. The police were, no one was after him. Then finally lit the whole joint on fire and went up in flames.
Jerome often took Brandon to bars and strip joints where he conducted business, which exposed young Brandon to the seedier side of life. But this conflicting parental dynamic was overshadowed when Brandon got introduced to skateboarding at the age of 7. Brandon accompanied his older half-sister to a skate park in Ocean City where she intended to meet up with a young admirer who just so happened to be a skateboarder. To this day, Brandon cannot recall who the skateboarder was, but ended up giving Brandon his very own skateboard. According to Brandon, the moment that skateboard touched his hands, all he wanted to do was become a skateboarder. He took to it instantly, skating as many hours as he could around Baltimore. A popular story Brandon tells is that after a day of skateboarding, when his mother tucked him into bed at night, she asked him a question.
And that night when my mother, God bless her, that night when my mother put me to bed with that first skateboard, she said, "Brandon, what would you like me to do with this skateboard?" And I said, "I want it in bed with me." She said, "Why?" And I said, "Because if I die, I want it to go with me to heaven." The moment that board touched my hand, I knew I was going to be a skateboarder for the rest of my life, right? I ate it, I breathed it, I slept it, I dreamt it.
Brandon spent a lot of time skateboarding, especially with older skateboarders. One in particular would prove to be pivotal in Brandon's transition to becoming a career skateboarder. Bucky Lasek was already a firmly established vert skater who was signed with the Powell Corporation team, Bones Brigade. He appeared in 2 of their sponsored films, Public Domain and Chaos. Being a fellow Baltimore native, Brandon looked up to and idolized Bucky. Bucky in turn took Brandon under his wing, referring to him as his, quote, little sidekick. This mentor-protege relationship would be instrumental in veteran skater Tony Hawk signing Brandon to the Powell Corporation. This meant Brandon was now hanging out with his idol, Bucky, on a regular basis. While accompanying him to a skating area called Cheapskates in the neighboring state of Pennsylvania, Brandon would meet another aspiring skater who would go on to have a huge impact on his later life, called Bam Margera. Brandon and Bam became instant friends and would frequently compete against each other in competitions. By age 13, Brandon was gaining serious momentum. He was touring throughout the country with other Powell skaters, as well as being featured in various articles. Unfortunately, as has been the case with many child celebrities who experience a massive surge of success early on, Brandon would soon experience a spectacular fall from grace. Brandon claims he first drank alcohol when he was only 7 years old.
It progressed to drinking with the kids at school. But the reality is I don't even remember the first time I indulged. Because it wasn't like I had goals, I had dreams, I had ambitions. I was going to be somebody. And I was at a young age.
Well, for sure.
His mother Pat recounts when she first found out Brandon was involved in drugs.
Involved with people like Tony Hawk and Bam, and things just started really going wild. And Brandon still wasn't that old. And then one Friday night, a man knocked at the door. I opened the door and the man said, "Your son stole my son's skateboard and I want the skateboard back tonight." I said, "Whoa, wait a minute, come in, sir." And he's got the kid with him. So the man came in with the kid, and I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Brandon, what's going on here? You got this kid's skateboard, give this boy his skateboard back." It turned out the kid owed Brandon drug money. Brandon's selling drugs and the kid didn't pay him, so Brandon took his skateboard.
By age 16, he soon progressed to more illegal substances. In his book Dream Seller, Brandon admits to being on tour feeling very ill from drug use. This caught the attention of other skaters, especially senior skater Mike Vallely, who told Brandon he was going to keep an eye on him. Later on in Atlanta, Brandon was caught with a significant amount of heroin.
And I'm on tour with a fellow by the name of Mike Vallely. And on this tour, he finds me with a lot of drugs, and he said, "Brandon, get rid of the drugs or get off the tour." I throw the drugs down the sewer. I meet a girl from the demo. I have her drive me back. I fish the drugs out of the sewer. Long story short, I get caught with the drugs. Mike Vallely kicks me off the tour.
After returning home to Baltimore, Brandon received a call from Tony Hawk with an offer to either go into treatment and continue skating or quit. Despite throwing away his dream, Brandon still had opportunities available. Little did he know he was about to transition into a TV/movie career that would connect him to a very popular franchise. But we'll get to that later. With Brandon no longer showing up for competitions, his childhood friend, Bam Margera, asked his former mentor, Bucky Lasek, what happened to him. To which Bucky replied, "He's on heroin."
Bucky showed up, and I wasn't there. And Bam's like, "Yo, what the fuck? Bucky, where's Novak?" And Bucky said, "Well, he's on heroin." And Bam's like, "What? What is that?" You know, he was so young, he had no idea what that was.
After leaving his number with a shop that Brandon frequented in Baltimore, Bam invited Brandon to stay with him at his home in Westchester, Pennsylvania, in an attempt to help him out. One condition being, Brandon had to stay off heroin. At the time, Bam had already come into his own success, not only as a skater, but as a TV star due to the success of the CKY videos, as well as the show Jackass. In 2003, Bam was experiencing further success with his own spin-off show, Viva La Bam. In 2004, Brandon would appear sporadically on the show for 18 episodes. This was a logical fit for Brandon, since he had already been featured in Bam's earlier video series, CKY, back in 2001, occasionally skating or being involved in skits. While on Viva La Bam, Brandon engaged in some pretty wild stunts, ranging from humiliating to straight up dangerous. But for Brandon, this wasn't an issue. Lethal stunts meant a visit to the hospital, which of course meant access to painkillers.
Now I can be like allowed to be drug addict. Listen to this noise.
Let's say worst case scenario, the stunt or skit goes terribly wrong and I get hurt and break some bones. That means I'm rushed to the hospital, which means doctors now prescribe me pain meds. And after all I wanted to do was heroin and pills, but that wasn't acceptable, right? But now that I've broken bones, I'm hurt, and the doctor writes me a script, it's like a justifiable high that nobody gives me shit over, which is what I've been in search of.
His ongoing friendship with Bam led to Brandon continuing to get various parts in film projects. A year before his debut on Viva La Bam, Brandon had a small role in the independent film Haggard, where he played a drug dealer named Dooley. When Viva La Bam wrapped up, Brandon made his big screen debut in the 2006 film Jackass 2, making Brandon a part of the extended Jackass family along with other skaters, actors, and musicians. He followed that up with an appearance in Bam Margera Presents Where the Fuck is Santa in 2008. That same year, he even wrote the aforementioned book Dream Seller, which would become a New York bestseller. Brandon was then brought back for Jackass in 2010. He even embarked on a music career with Bam, being the opening act for his band, Fuckface Unstoppable. Despite all this success, behind the scenes things were much darker. As the years went by, aside from a brief few years of sobriety beyond 2003, Brandon's addictions got progressively worse and his life began to unravel. Early on during his stay with Bam Margera, Brandon was frequently caught with heroin.
Dude, I gotta check. I mean, you just got back to Baltimore. I'm fucking shady right now. Like, yeah.
I respect it 100%. Here's cigarettes, phone card, tickets that need to come out, and a receipt for what I paid back.
What else is going on in there? Seriously, just fucking...
No, I completely will tell you.
Take it all out. Fuck.
I completely will tell you.
Take the whole thing out. Take it all out.
Anything you see coming out of Crockett's coming out of Crockett's. This Crockett's too deep to reach it. You can reach it out.
Do that one.
Reach in there if they can. Pull it out. Trust me, I won't come up here to fucking bullshit.
I know, dude. I'm just saying, man. If you're fucking doing that shit in my house, I seriously gotta kick you out.
Or even disappearing completely for days at a time, only to suddenly re-emerge with a dubious excuse as to his absence, when in reality, he simply returned to Baltimore to score more drugs.
What were you doing in the woods? There's no reason to fucking climb. What are you fucking doing out there?
Well, I told you, honestly, I did a kickflip, couldn't land it through my fucking board there. But I can tell you...
You did it twice. I saw you in the woods twice.
I can't, I'm telling you, that's what that.
You did 2 kickflips and they both landed in the same fucking spot in the woods?
I walked up there to eat my bar.
I don't want to have to, every time you come back from fucking Baltimore, I have to fucking pat you down.
And it shouldn't have to be like that. It shouldn't. You know what I mean? I was at once a professional skateboarder, now I'm a complete heroin addict. I'm not proud of it.
You tell me what to do.
During a number of his on-screen appearances, Brandon can be seen visibly in a haze, due to either being high or going through withdrawal. Bam would repeatedly kick Brandon out of his home, only to invite him back when it appeared Brandon was relatively clean. When he was back in Baltimore living with his mother, she frequently found drug paraphernalia in his room. Various attempts were made to get Brandon into rehab, with the first one being when he was just 17 years old, mere months after he quit skating for Powell.
So now I'm home and I'm with my mother and I'm with my girl, and about 2 months into this, they come to me one day and they said, Brandon, we have a great idea for you. I said, what's that? They said, we want you to go to treatment. I thought about it for a second and I said, that's a phenomenal idea. A, I have the time, and B, I'm going to report to this treatment center and I will report back to my mother and my girl why I'm not those people, nor will I ever be. Follow me here. I'm going into this treatment center with a closed mind and a closed heart to prove to these two why I'm not those people. Simply caught me at a bad time, on a bad way, in a bad day. Overreaction at best.
Over the course of a decade and a half, Brandon would find himself in and out of prison for drug possession or for forging scripts, interspersed with going into rehab 12 more times. This was particularly upsetting because some of those treatment centers were financed by Brandon's own mother, Pat, who not only depleted her own savings, but she also sold at least 3 homes in order to pay for them. And this was on top of the fact that Brandon also began stealing money and even Christmas presents from her, all just to fund his habit. Into the 2010s, Brandon was a full-blown junkie.
My days are kind of somewhat upward, man. I have hepatitis C, right? And I drink every day like it's going out of style. And it's not fair, man. Not fair to my mother. Stay the fuck off drugs, kids, man, because I fucked up so bad. And I'm just so sick of fucking lying, and I'm so sick of trying to figure out who I can tell the truth to and who I can't.
He was soon doing what is known as speedballs, a deadly mixture of cocaine and heroin. While the high experienced by using such a combination is indeed intense, the chances of a heart attack or overdose are far greater. Over the years, many celebrities have died through the use of speedballs, including Chris Farley, River Phoenix, and Lane Staley. Brandon ingested at least 3 in his life and survived. Not that that is something to be proud of, since he had already overdosed 4 times and even spent a week on life support. By 2014, Brandon was looking gaunt and very strung out, barely able to construct coherent sentences. Brandon sometimes found himself homeless and even resorted to prostituting himself to other men just to get money or the means to score more drugs. While he was on tour with Fuckface Unstoppable, Brandon was almost constantly out of his mind, ingesting large amounts of alcohol as well as other substances he can get his hands on. It got to a stage where some people thought Brandon was nearing his own end.
My mother had bought me a plot, people had taken life insurance policies out on me, and I was on life support for 7 days.
Things came to a head in May of 2015. Brandon was caught yet again by BAM with a large amount of heroin.
So around that time, I get a phone call from my best friend, Ben Margera. And he said, we're going on tour to Australia. If you could just drink wine, you'll do great. So against my better judgment, I jumped on a train and I go back to Philadelphia. I stop in Kensington, I buy a decent amount of heroin, and I go over to Bam's house. And he says, come upstairs, I want to show you some footage that I'm editing. And when I get upstairs, I go to pull my cigarettes out of my pocket and all my heroin falls out of my pocket.
Bam, who at this point was slipping into his own addiction issues concerning alcohol, told Brandon to get out of his house for the final time and kicked him off a scheduled Fuckface Unstoppable tour. Brandon then returned to Baltimore to his mother's house, only to be greeted with a restraining order. It turns out Bam had called Pat ahead of time and informed her that Brandon was still using heroin. Completely exasperated, Pat could no longer deal with the pain of watching her son slowly kill himself. She had tried for so many years to help Brandon get clean and spent thousands of dollars on rehab, only for Brandon to squander each and every opportunity. So that was that. Brandon had now completely lost everything and burned every bridge. His skating career was now a distant memory, his TV and movie gigs had now dried up, both his family and friends had reached their limits with him and backed away. He literally only had a few possessions to his name.
Everything that I owned in my life consisted of 8 scarves, 2 jackets, 3 socks, and a stick of deodorant. It all fit into a bag that doubled as my pillow and 4 cigarette butts that I dug out of a receptacle from a building.
With nothing left to lose and desperately wanting to kill himself, Brandon made a call to his long-suffering sponsor, who got him into his 13th and last treatment center with Today Inc., based in Pennsylvania.
At the end of my run, at 35 years old, I walked into my 13th inpatient treatment center.
After a 4-day detox and a 90-day treatment program, the unimaginable happened. Brandon Thomas Novak emerged finally clean and sober. Fast forward to the present day, at the time of this video being uploaded, Brandon has maintained his sobriety. But instead of resting on his laurels, Brandon has used his destructive past to educate and inform. In tandem with his own clean and sober living, today he is a certified intervention professional and dedicates his life to helping others with their struggles with drugs and alcohol, working on treatment programs as well as opening sober living houses in Delaware with his business partner, George the Greek Evangelo, a person who attended the same treatment center as Brandon.
This is the Greek.
What up?
YOLO.
YOLO.
Liftos.
Yiftos everywhere.
Gypsies everywhere, Greek term.
Yes, absolutely. You're all gypsies.
So this is the Greek. I met him in rehab. You can tell he's very Greek.
Yes.
He's got the full-on get-up. Do you
Got a
have
match.
the polo shoes?
He's got a match.
You have the polo socks?
You always got a match.
Along with this, Brandon is often invited as a special guest speaker for various different people. Despite his busy schedule, Brandon makes time to appear on various podcasts, most notably with fellow Jackass cast member Steve-O, where he speaks with brutal, uncensored honesty about his past. Unfortunately, the rift between Brandon and Bam has not been fixed due to Bam's own addiction issues.
The last thing I want to talk about that's been driving me up a wall. My best friend, Brandon Novak, life partner, I don't not want anything to do with him ever since he got sober. He's been 4 years sober, and congratulations, but all he does, if he's not on the phone talking about sobriety, he's texting while he's talking about sobriety. So if you're like, hey, Novak, what's your favorite color? He'll be texting, it's 1 second. I can't take that. So I just stopped talking to him whatsoever. I couldn't take it anymore. And because I sip on beers or whatever, he says to me, I can't sit here and watch you kill yourself on Coors Lights and Adderall.
While he has distanced himself from Bam, Brandon has left the door open to patch things up and has shown appreciation for all that Bam has done for him.
And you see Bam's public tirades and the fact that he focused a lot of his attention and his anger on me for a little while. Did it hurt? Absolutely. Was I angry? Absolutely. Did I retaliate? Definitely not. Because the reality is, why me, why me? It's like, why the fuck not me? As many times that I hurt him, I took advantage of him, I lied to him, I stole from him, he always lent a hand. And now, what better person to understand where he's at than me? So there's nothing he could say that would offend me or hurt me or make me, abandon our friendship. I won't. And I'll see this through with him to the very end, good, bad, or indifferent.
On a personal note, I do hold out hope for a reconciliation between these two once close childhood friends, since they have been through so much together and now have both experienced the struggles associated with addiction. perhaps most heartwarming of all, Brandon has reconnected with his mother, and they now have a far better relationship. She has featured a lot on Brandon's own YouTube channel, where he affectionately calls her the Shuffler. Brandon maintains other social medias, including his own website, where people can reach out to him.
You're doing your calling here.
Yeah.
You know, it's always been fun watching you. As a Baltimore native, we want to see people do great things, but what you're doing now, this is your greatest work. We're proud of what you're doing. Good luck.
Thank you so much. And if you need help, call me. 610-635-9092. That's my personal number.
His phone number right there.
Or you can just do that one. 610-546-2608. Call me.
He's going to walk you through this. The light at the end of the tunnel here.
While finishing up the editing process for this video, my copy of his book, Dream Seller, arrived, which I have now started reading. According to IMDb, Brandon has a new documentary coming out sometime in the future, which will no doubt contain far more detailed information. It's certainly something I am looking forward to.